The year was 1212. The sun blazed over the high plains of Andalusia, casting its light on two armies so vast, so determined, that Europe and North Africa held their breath. To the north, the Christian kingdoms, marching under the banners of Castile, Aragon, and Navarre. To the south, the might of the Almohad Caliphate, the most powerful Muslim dynasty of its age. They came not just for land, not just for victory, but for survival. On this field, Los Navas de Tolosa, the fate of Iberia would be decided. A crusade called by the Pope, a Caliph determined to crush Christendom. Tens of thousands of men, kings, knights, crusaders, and warriors of faith would collide in one of the most decisive battles of the Middle Ages. And by the time the sun set on July 16th, the world would never be the same. The call had gone out from Rome itself. Pope Innocent III, one of the most powerful pontiffs of the Middle Ages, had declared a holy crusade. His message was clear. The Christian kingdoms of Iberia must unite, or risk being swept away by the rising tide of the Almohads. And so, for the first time in living memory, rival crowns set aside their disputes. From Castile rode King Alfonso VIII, a monarch scarred by past defeats, but burning for redemption. His kingdom had suffered under the weight of Almohad power, and this battle was not just duty. For Alfonso, it was personal. At his side came Sancho VII of Navarre, tall, broad-shouldered, a warrior king whose very presence on the field inspired men to fight harder. His reputation was one of brute strength and unshakable resolve. And from the east, Peter II of Aragon marched in with his Catalan and Aragonese knights. Skilled, disciplined, proud, Peter's forces brought a sharp edge to the coalition. Together, the three monarchs split their host into great divisions. Sancho commanded the left, Peter took the right, and Alfonso, carrying the weight of Christendom on his shoulders, commanded the center. But this was no ordinary army of kings. Marching with them were the most feared warriors of Christendom, the Knights Templar and the Knights Hospitaller. Hardened by decades of crusading in the Holy Land, they were legends in their own time, men whose names carried both awe and terror. From Portugal and Leon came knights, their kings absent but their swords sharp, riding beneath the cross of Christ. And from across the Pyrenees, French crusaders, lured by the Pope's indulgences, had joined the march. Many would abandon the cause before the battle, wearied from the long punishing campaign. But those who stayed would write their names into history. In all, 20 to 25,000 Christian warriors stood ready. They were fewer than their foes, but they had something the Almohads did not: the desperation of men who believed this was their last chance to save their homelands. And as dawn broke over the Iberian plains, they looked south, towards an enemy unlike any they had ever faced. To the south, a storm had gathered. From the deserts of North Africa to the fertile valleys of Al-Andalus, the call of the Almohad Caliphate had summoned warriors beyond counting. At their head stood Caliph Muhammad al-Nasir, known to the Christians as Miramolin, a ruler of immense ambition, determined to crush the kingdoms of Iberia once and for all. The Almohads were no fading dynasty. They were the heirs of empire, a Berber power that had risen in the late 12th century, sweeping aside the Almoravids and binding together lands that stretched from the shores of Morocco to the heart of Spain. Their faith was fierce, their discipline unmatched, their will to dominate unquestioned. And now Muhammad al-Nasir brought with him what chroniclers called the largest Muslim host the peninsula had seen in centuries. 30 to 35,000 men. An army not just of soldiers, but of an entire civilization on the march. The Caliph's camp was a fortress in itself. His tent stood surrounded by his elite black guard, African warriors chained together so that none could retreat, each man a living wall of flesh and steel. Before them stretched a network of trenches, ditches, and defensive works carefully prepared to break any frontal assault. The Almohad army was a mosaic of strength. Veteran infantry hardened by campaigns across North Africa. Cavalry from the Maghreb, swift and ruthless. Archers and skirmishers drawn from Andalusian towns. All drilled, all prepared, all united under the Caliph's banner. The Christians looked south and saw not just an enemy. They saw a force that outnumbered them by nearly 10,000. A force entrenched on higher ground, fortified and brimming with confidence. The stage was set. Two civilizations, two worlds staring each other down across the plains of Andalusia. For days, they waited, neither side willing to strike. The summer sun blazed, tempers frayed, nerves stretched to breaking. And then, on July 16th, Alfonso VIII could wait no longer. He gave the order. The Christians advanced. The horns of Castile sounded, drums thundered, and the Christian host surged forward across the plain. At the center, King Alfonso placed his most trusted warriors, the Knights Templar, the Hospitallers, and the heavy infantry of Castile. To the flanks, Peter of Aragon held the right with his Catalan and Aragonese troops, while Sancho of Navarre stood firm on the left with his hardened retinue. Behind them, the three kings themselves remained with their heavy cavalry, waiting for the decisive moment to strike. The vanguard pressed first, light infantry, shielded archers, and crossbowmen, loosing volleys to disrupt the Muslim front. But soon came the weight of steel. The Christian heavy infantry advanced with spears, axes, and long lances, weapons designed for one purpose: to break through living flesh and armored lines. And then it happened. With a roar that echoed across the plain, the Christians crashed into the Muslim front. The clash was brutal, the kind that makes the earth itself shudder. The lighter Almohad infantry, unprepared for the sheer ferocity of the charge, broke almost instantly. Men were cut down where they stood, formations shredded, discipline gone. Chroniclers wrote that the Christian knights fought as if the survival of their very souls hung in the balance. And perhaps it did. They hacked, thrust, and crushed with a fury born not of ambition, but of desperation. The knowledge that if they fell here, their kingdoms, their homes, their families would be next. The Muslim front collapsed in chaos. Soldiers fled, stumbling back toward the safety of the second line. Panic spread like wildfire. And yet, Alfonso held his men in check. No reckless pursuit, no wild scattering. He knew the real test was yet to come. Ahead, on higher ground, behind trenches and defenses, stood the true strength of Muhammad al-Nasir's army. The first Muslim line was broken, but the battle had only just begun. The plain fell silent for only a heartbeat. The first Muslim line was gone, crushed under the weight of the Christian assault. But as the dust cleared, the real enemy revealed itself. Ahead lay the second line of the Almohad army, drawn up on higher ground, a ridge fortified by trenches. Troops more disciplined, more seasoned, more heavily armed. This was the wall the Caliph trusted to hold. Alfonso gave the order, and once again, the Christian host surged forward. The ground was uneven, the slope cruel. The trenches slowed their advance, breaking formations, scattering men as they tried to climb the ridge. The Almohads were ready,
Arrows rained down, spears bristled in defense. And when the Christians finally slammed into their lines, they met an enemy as stubborn and unyielding as stone. Steel rang against steel. Shield met shield, neither side giving an inch. Minutes turned to hours. The summer sun burned overhead, merciless. Armor grew heavy. Throats parched. Sweat stung eyes. The Christians had already spent their strength in the first assault, and now fatigue crept into their limbs like poison. The Almohad sensed it. Their lines pushed harder, step by step, driving the Christians back down the slope. For the first time that day, Alfonso's crusaders wavered. Formations frayed. Men faltered. Some even turned to run. The battle that had begun with thunder and triumph now teetered on the edge of disaster. And at the very center where Alfonso commanded, the Christians came dangerously close to breaking. At the heart of the Christian line, chaos was growing. Men were tired. Their armor weighed them down. Their swords felt like lead. The heat of the Iberian sun was merciless, sapping both strength and morale. Alfonso VIII saw it all, his center teetering on the edge of collapse. And in that moment, the king made a decision that would echo through history. He lowered his visor, spurred his horse, and with a shout that carried across the battlefield, he charged straight into the thick of the fight. Beside him thundered his elite heavy cavalry, banners snapping, lances leveled, horses screaming as they collided with the Muslim front. The effect was immediate. Men who had been about to flee steadied themselves. The infantry around Alfonso reformed, drawing courage from their king's presence. For the first time in hours, the Christians felt hope again. But the Almohads were relentless. Their cavalry swept forward to crush the resurgent Christian center. Dust and screams filled the air. Spears shattered, shields splintered. The clash was thunderous, the ground trembling beneath the hooves of charging horses. And then the counterstrike. The Christian heavy cavalry surged forward. Knights of Castile, Aragon, and Navarre thundered into battle. At the forefront rode the Templars, the Hospitallers, orders of Santiago and Calatrava, veterans of the Holy Land, seasoned in decades of crusading. Their reputation alone struck fear into the Muslim forces. The impact was cataclysmic. Cavalry met cavalry, horses toppled, men were thrown to the ground. The air rang with the clash of steel and the screams of the dying. But the Christians had one advantage the Almohads could not match: sheer determination. The kings themselves rode the lines, shouting, urging, inspiring. Peter, Sancho, and Alfonso became living symbols of hope. Men found new strength in their presence. Exhausted warriors rallied, their swords flashing again. The tide of battle began to turn, slowly, then decisively. The Christians gained ground. The Almohads, who had pushed them back only hours earlier, began to falter. The first cracks appeared in the mighty Muslim lines, and the moment that would break the enemy was approaching. Momentum now belonged to the Christians. The thunder of hoofs rolled across the plain. Spears and swords flashed in the blazing sun. Alfonso's center, once on the verge of collapse, now became a battering ram driving deep into the heart of the Almohad army. On the left, Peter of Aragon pressed forward, his Catalan knights hacking and thrusting with relentless precision. But it was Sancho VII of Navarre, the towering, fearsome figure astride his warhorse, who would deliver the decisive blow. Leading his heavy cavalry, Sancho charged directly into the Muslim flank. Shields shattered, spears snapped. Men fell under the sheer weight of horse and steel. the flank crumbled. The lines that had held for hours began to splinter. At the very center of the battlefield stood the Caliph's pavilion. Guarding it were the Black Guard, African warriors chained together so that none could flee, shoulder to shoulder, a living wall of men ready to die. The Christians descended upon them with fury. The clash was savage, terrifying, merciless. Chained warriors fought with desperation, striking and defending with the knowledge that retreat was impossible. But the Christian knights, heavier, stronger, and more numerous, pressed relentlessly forward. One by one, the Black Guard fell. Chains dragging them down, swords cutting through shields, men and horses tumbling in a sea of chaos. And when the last of them died, the Caliph's heart of defense was gone. Muhammad al-Nasir fled the battlefield. His banners vanished, his army scattered. What had once been the most formidable force in Iberia dissolved into panic and death. The Christians did not relent. Cavalry swept across the plain, cutting down any who could not escape. By evening, Las Navas de Tolosa was a field of bodies, rivers of blood running through the dust. Estimates suggest 20,000 Almohads dead, while Christian casualties were around 2,000. The scale of the victory was staggering, and yet for all the horror, for all the blood, the triumph was undeniable. The Almohads had been broken. Their empire in Iberia shattered. For the first time in generations, the Christian kingdoms could move forward with confidence. The battle was remembered as a divine triumph, a turning point in the centuries-long Reconquista, a clash that would shift the destiny of the peninsula forever. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the plain of Las Navas de Tolosa lay silent, broken only by the wind whispering through the blood-soaked grass. Thousands of fallen warriors, Christian and Muslim alike, were strewn across the battlefield, a grim testament to the day's fury. For the Christians, it was more than a victory. It was a divine reckoning. Chroniclers wrote that the force of faith had turned the tide, that heaven itself had favored the united kingdoms of Castile, Aragon, and Navarre. The banners of Christendom flew high, and the Knights of the Templar, Hospitaller, Santiago, and Calatrava orders cemented their fearsome reputations. For the Almohads, the defeat was catastrophic. The Caliph had fled, the Black Guard destroyed, and their army scattered. The once unassailable power that had dominated Iberia for decades was shattered. Within years, the great Almohad Empire would fragment, never again to pose the same threat to the Christian kingdoms. Yet victory carried its own weight. The men who fought had faced the horrors of a battlefield like no other: exhaustion, fear, the haunting knowledge of death surrounding them at every turn. They had fought for survival, for their homelands, for the fate of civilizations, and history would remember it. Las Navas de Tolosa became a turning point. The day Christian Iberia seized the advantage, the day Almohad dominance began its long decline, the day faith, steel, and courage reshaped the destiny of a continent. But as we look back, one question lingers in the shadows of that dusty plain. Had Alfonso VIII not charged into the heart of the battle? Had Sancho's devastating cavalry charge not split the enemy flank? Would history have been written the same way? We may never know. All we can do is stand on the field in imagination, hear the clash of swords, feel the roar of men and horses, and remember a day when the fate of a continent hung in the balance. Las Navas de Tolosa was not just a battle. It was a turning point, a moment of history forged in blood, courage, and unyielding will.